Hi weaving friends, today we're going to be talking about table looms and in particular what you need to know when you are looking at purchasing a new table loom. This video is brought to you by the online course Weaving on a Table Loom. With over 7 hours of video content and many printable PDFs, this comprehensive and in-depth course will teach you everything you need to know about setting up and getting started weaving on a 4-shaft table loom. First of all, we weave a sampler and then we go on to weave a beautiful project, which is a luxurious scarf that will impress everybody you know. This has been such a popular course because it really takes you from the very beginning so that you can get to know your table loom and have the confidence to be able to go on yourself. Here's what some other people are saying about weaving on a table loom. This was awesome. Would not be able to enjoy this craft without your expert guidance. Thank you for sharing all your knowledge. I now feel comfortable in starting my next weaving adventure, the table loom, Margot. And from Lisa, it is such a comprehensive course, so very well thought out and presented. I love that you explain not only the hows but also the whys of what we're doing and give us so many options and views to find our own best way. One of my favorite phrases to hear is, let's have another look at that now from a different angle. I've been looking forward to this course because I knew you would make it great, and you have. Your hard work really shows. I feel like I'm forever thanking you, but here is yet another heartfelt thank you. If this sounds like the right course for you, check out the link below and head on over to the online weaving school. Now on with today's video. So when you're looking at buying a table loom, especially if you are buying one brand new and perhaps it's the first time that you've ever bought a table loom, it's really worth putting in extra time to do the research because you don't want to end up with buyer regret. But sometimes, which can be the case with any loom that you're buying, you don't really know the right questions to ask because you don't know what you don't know. So that's why I felt it was important to make this video today. I do have a heap of table loom resources already, and I'm going to link to them down below. Some of them are videos, some of them are blog posts. All of them are directed at the new buyer or the new table loom weaver. And because I myself was a new table loom weaver once, and because I receive messages all the time of people asking me questions about table looms, it's really easy for me to compile a list of the things that I think are really important that you think about and really mull over and research before you buy your first table loom, so that your experience weaving on a table loom is going to be a happy one. I do have a list of questions and I haven't put them in any particular order because I think they're all pretty equally important. Maybe some more than others, but still they all warrant thinking about. Before I start going through the questions, I just want to take a moment to encourage you to like this video, subscribe to my channel and share this video with anyone you think may benefit from it. So let's start looking at some of the main considerations for buying a table loom. No matter what table loom you're looking at, whether you're looking at grabbing a brand new one or whether you're buying secondhand, the cost is a really important factor, right? Because it pertains to you and your individual situation, and only you know how much you can spend or how much you're willing to spend, and maybe if you're willing to wait and save up for the table loom that you really want. Look at as many costs comparisons as you can, and one of the links down below will be a cost comparison for different types of table looms. But I would say that the cost of the loom is one of the major players influencing your decision on which one to buy. Now for some people it's going to be a matter of which brand loom you really want. There certainly is a difference in cost between table looms, and in some cases it can be quite a large difference. Now I'm not today going to look at all of the different brands of table looms and compare their costs, but that should definitely be an important part of your research. Now this consideration ties very strongly in with the last one, which is the cost. You have to know what you're going to actually get with your loom. And that comes down to your research as well. Make sure that you read listings properly if you're looking at listings online, or if you're speaking to somebody in store, make sure you know exactly what you're getting with your loom and ask the question, is there anything extra that I need to buy? A good example of this is my Ashford table loom right behind me. Now this particular 8-shaft table loom comes with a couple of stick shuttles, a certain number of textile heddles, all the kind of equipment that makes putting the loom together, but you do need to purchase a rattle kit separately, and you do need to purchase a warping board separately. And you need to know these things because some of these extras that you need to buy are going to increase your costs significantly. If you wanted to use a boat shuttle instead of a stick shuttle, well then that's kind of a matter of how long is a piece of string, because there are so many different boat shuttles and so many different prices. One thing I would recommend though is if you're just starting out on the table loom and you do want to try a boat shuttle, start with a base level boat shuttle. There's no need to buy the best of the best to begin with. And for myself personally, I'm still using the student boat shuttles that I started out with on this loom. They were reasonably priced and they do the job really well. Most table looms will come with a standard size reed. So the reed right here that goes in the beater, usually it's a 10 dent, sometimes it's a 12 dent. Another thing to check with your particular manufacturer, but that may be an extra cost as well if you want a different sized reed. There are two aspects to the size of your loom. There is first of all the actual weaving width, and then there is the actual width of the loom itself. So right behind me I have the 16-inch weaving width, but as you can see, the weaving width comes to each side of the reed here, and then I have more width at the front of the loom. Something to take into account. So the size of the loom, this is a super important consideration for several reasons. Let's go over the weaving width first. You need to think really hard, and it can be difficult to do if you've never woven on a table loom, but say you've been weaving on a rigid Heddle loom already, or you might be completely new to weaving. But if you have any idea about the kinds of things that you really feel you want to weave the most of at the moment and going forward in your weaving future, that's going to have a big impact on your choice of size. This 16-inch loom really is just my teaching and sampling loom. 16 inches is fairly limited. It's great for things like scarves or narrow objects like this. Not so good for towels or anything a little bit larger. So you might at the moment think, well, all I'm going to be weaving is scarves. But to be realistic, do you really want to weave scarves for your entire weaving life? Most of us don't. Most of us want a little bit of extra flexibility. Now, for some people, it'll be the 24-inch weaving width will be spot on, because you can weave your scarves, your towels, you can weave panels of fabric to sew together and that sort of thing. For others, they're going to want a larger width. They're going to be thinking, okay, I want to weave shawls and baby blankets and those wider kind of objects. Then for you, it would be better to go up to a larger size, like the 30-inch. Okay, so having said all of that, the next part of considering size is what sort of a space you have where you want to set up the loom. Do you actually have the space for a larger loom if you want one? Having owned the larger Ashford table loom in the past, it was really quite a large loom, and I had it on the table, on this table as a matter of fact, and it took up a really good portion of the table. So it worked out okay for me because I had that space at the time. But you need to think about whether you realistically have that space. Then if you want to add, maybe you want to have a stand for your table loom rather than having it on a table, do you have somewhere that you can put your stand and your loom on top and not have to fold it away and move it every time you finished weaving, because that would just be really frustrating. Being able to leave it set up somewhere is great. Now, not just the space of actually containing the loom, but think about the fact that when you're weaving, you'll be passing a shuttle. Do you have room in that space for your arms to be moving and that sort of thing? You don't need a huge amount of space for that, but a little bit of clearance is great. Another thought is when you're putting a warp on the loom. So For this table loom, I use the entire table pretty much when I'm putting a warp on, so that I have that extra space to stretch the warp out, pull it out and tug it when I need to, and just have that sort of clearance around the loom so that I can move around it and be effective in warping it as well. So that's something important to think about, is just the larger your weaving width, the larger the loom will be as well. The next thing that I wanted to mention when I'm talking about the size of the loom is the shafts of the loom. This is something else that you have to decide on before you actually purchase the loom. Are you going to buy one with 4 shafts? Are you going to buy one with 8 shafts or more? It's something that can be really hard to decide on if you have never woven on a table loom, or if you've never woven on more than 4 shafts. Currently, I believe the most number of shafts that you can get on a table loom are 16. That would be the Ashford Katie loom. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that that is the most number that you can get. So let's say that you were thinking about the Katie with its 16 shafts, because 16 shafts, it sounds pretty good, right? But again, it's great to be realistic and think, am I actually going to use those 16 shafts a lot, or enough to justify wanting them? Usually the more shafts you have on a loom, the more you have to compromise on other things like the size of the loom. So for example, the Katie with 16 inches, I believe it's only available up to a 24 weaving width. And that is because they've tried to make it a portable loom and foldable and that sort of thing. And so the more shafts, the more difficult it gets to do that. From my point of view, even on my floor loom, the shaft combinations I use the most often and have used for years is the 4 shafts. Now this might be because I'm absolutely besotted with overshot, which is a 4 shaft weave, but also I find personally I just prefer a lot of 4 shaft patterns over an 8 shaft or more. I certainly appreciate a lot of the more complex patterns, but for everyday weaving and for what I seem to do most often, it's definitely 4 shafts. And trust me, there are so many 4 shaft drafts available out there that will keep you busy for a very long time. Here's one thing to consider. The Ashford table looms, some of them will have the option to buy 4 now and 4 later. Great idea, absolutely marvelous idea. It means that you can start out on 4 shafts and you can get used to weaving on 4 shafts, and you also don't have that initial extra outlay of money for the extra shafts that you may not be using. And then if you decide down the track, oh, I really do think that I want to expand into more than 4 shafts, then you have that option to purchase a kit and set that up on your loom. So definitely consider that as a possible option if you're a little bit unsure about the number of shafts you want to be having. Unless you buy a floor stock table loom directly from a shop, or you're buying it secondhand from a seller, if you buy a brand new table loom, it will come in boxes, not set up. You need to actually put it together yourself. So that's just something else to think about. If you find it difficult to put things together, or you don't enjoy doing that, that may influence your buying decision, whether you buy one that's already set up. I should mention as well, there may be some shops or suppliers who will put the loom together for you for an extra fee. I'm not 100% on that, and I think it would depend very much on the individual shop owners. But that could be something that you could ask about. If you buy an Ashford loom, my husband and I have a 2-part video here on YouTube. It's also included in the Weaving on a Table Loom course, and it's pretty comprehensive, showing you how to put your table loom together. Also, any table loom you buy, if it's new, it'll come with instructions. It's just how easy you find those instructions to follow. So, do you want a loom that is portable? This ties back in with what I've already said about size. It's something important to think about. A lot of people like to take their table looms to classes. You can warp it at home, take it along in the car, set it up easily wherever you are having the class, and then pack it up and take it home again. So that is going to get more difficult the larger your loom is. thinking about the 30-inch loom that I had. I could carry it by myself, but it really wasn't ideal, especially with my back issues. So usually I had someone on the other side to help me carry it, and I didn't really take it places. A loom of this size, the 16 inches, easy done. I actually did take this loom last week to the school where I was doing some weaving workshops, and it went in the car no problems at all. I didn't even fold down the castle. Here's one that you may not have thought about, what kind of yarns you envision yourself using on a table loom. You have a little bit more freedom on something like a rigid Heddle loom to use thicker yarns, but at least for the warp on a table loom, each warp end has to go through a textile of Heddle. And so if you have a really thick yarn, that's probably not going to work out very well. I myself generally never use a yarn that is heavier than a fingering weight yarn on the table loom. And my most commonly used yarns are in the sort of 8-2 cotton range. You may need to think about where you're actually purchasing your loom from and how long it's going to take to get to you. This hasn't been such a problem in the past. In the current global climate, shall I say, we have a lot of supply issues, and this is certainly true for looms as well. Now, I've heard some people recently who were told that they were in for a 3-month wait when they ordered their loom. That has turned into a 6-month wait, which has turned into a 10-month wait. Now, if you decide to buy a table loom and you contact your local supplier, you may get lucky and they may have one in stock and they can ship it out to you, or you can pick it up straight away. That's not so common these days. What's more common is that you have to go on a list, put down a deposit and wait as long as it takes for the loom to be made and then shipped out to you. This is unfortunate, but it's happening across the board with all kinds of things recently. And in my opinion, it's only going to get worse. Now, I don't want this to be me pushing you to put in an order for a table loom. All I'm saying is, if you are at the point of, you've been thinking about it for some time and you've sort of already decided that you do want a table loom, now would be a better time to order, because as the saying goes, the best time to plant a tree is yesterday. Same with purchases in the current climate. If you have been thinking about a table loom and you're still not sure, keep thinking about it by all means. And also don't forget to look for other avenues. You don't necessarily have to purchase brand new. There are secondhand and used table looms floating around out there. Sometimes you just have to be in the right place at the right time to make it happen. Check places like Facebook Marketplace and your local online reselling sites. And also, if you belong to a guild, that would be a really good place to check. Now, it might really depend on the table loom that you have, the brand, but in general, I think it's fair to say that a table loom does not hold as much tension as a floor loom. And I like to just tell people that just so that they know. I didn't know that myself before I bought one the first time, and I was expecting really good tension. And it took a bit of getting used to and practicing to get used to that lack of tension and thinking about different things that I could introduce to improve that. This is not really a problem for a narrower width piece like a scarf, but on my larger loom, something like a blanket, a baby blanket, the tension can leave a little bit to be desired, especially once you've woven on a floor loom and you can feel what really good tension does feel like. On a table loom, you can get things like the back apron rod bowing, because you've got your warp on there and it tends to pull in towards the middle, and then the apron rod can kind of bow in the direction that the tension is pulling, which is not ideal. I haven't had one break on me. One way that I've gotten around this a little bit is to not loop directly onto the apron rod itself, but to have a second stick or a metal rod is really good because it's very strong. And then to tie that onto the apron rod, and then having that double fortification tends to help a bit with the bowing. So an extra thing to think about if you want to weave projects where you're going to require really tight tension, a table loom may not be able to achieve that for you in the way that you want it to. Okay, so some looms you can buy treadle kits for, others you cannot. If you are interested in treadles, you will need to have a stand for the table loom first of all, and then you buy the treadle kit as a separate purchase. Now, if you're not familiar with treadles or you can't envision what I'm talking about, instead of operating the loom with these levers, like I do for this one, because I've just got this sitting on a table with no treadles. So instead of using the levers, you have the shafts tied up to some treadles that are on the floor, and you operate the shafts much as you do with a floor loom, with your feet instead of with your hands and lifting and lowering levers. Now, I'm not going to say that one option is better over another because it's completely individual. Some of you will find it much easier to just use the levers. Some of you will find it much easier to use treadles. I believe that there are some table looms that don't have a treadle option, and also I think most of them, at least the ones that I'm familiar with, you can only do 4 treadles. So there's a limit to how many shafts you can actually tie up to your treadles. The next thing I want to talk about is your own physical situation. That's going to vary, of course, from person to person, but it's something that's really important in making your decision on a table loom. Now, if you do have certain physical problems, whatever they may be, I think that there is usually a solution that will allow you to weave on the loom that you want to weave. But there might have to be modifications, or you might have to consider exactly how you're going to do that. A concrete example of this would be if you have a shoulder injury. And let's say that the shoulder injury is bad enough that it's ongoing and it bothers you a lot. If you are, say, seated at the table loom, let me move it around so I can show you. I'm seated in my chair, my adjustable chair at the table. I've got my chair up as high as it goes and I'm seated in close to the table. This is a really good position for my back, but what about my shoulders if I have a shoulder injury? What I'm doing is I'm constantly operating these levers plus the shuttle. So let's just weave a little so that we can see. Yes, I'm constantly putting levers up and I'm reaching out at a certain angle with my arms, which is going to affect my shoulder if my shoulder's a problem. What some people would choose to do instead with a table loom, actually a lot of people choose to stand and operate their table loom that way, so then your shoulder is angled down a little more. And also some people just like to stand because they find it more comfortable to actually weave on. So you can see it's quite a different angle. Now for myself, I don't mind standing for let's say a couple of minutes, but any more than that and my back's going to start hurting. So for me, sitting is the best option. So then I would have to consider, okay, if I've got the shoulder injury, if I'm still using that example, sitting here and operating the levers, well, even myself without a shoulder injury, I do get sore shoulders, I get a sore neck if I weave for, quite some time on the table loom. So one way to think around that could be the treadle option, to have a stand and to be operating the shafts with my treadles, with my feet, so that upstairs all I have to think about is using the shuttle back and forth. And that's much less stress and strain on my shoulders. That's just one example of how you need to think about what your own physical capabilities are. Be realistic about it, because it's a big purchase for you to make only to find that you can't actually weave on it for very long because you have pain somewhere. What I did initially is I really wanted a floor loom many years ago. I'd been rigid Heddle weaving for some time, and it was my dream of dreams to have a floor loom. My back was terrible at the time. I was going to a chiropractor 2 times a week, and things were really hard, and I felt like it was just not going to get any better than that, but I still had this desire to weave on a floor loom. I compromised and got the table loom because I knew that I could at least sit comfortably at a table loom and weave for some time. It was a fantastic decision. I didn't know that at the time that it would be. I was quite apprehensive about it, but it ended up being such a blessing because not only was I able to sit and weave at the table loom, it also taught me so much about multi-shaft weaving in a kind of really gentle way, so that after a lot of time and treatment, when my back had improved a lot and I did eventually get my dream of dreams floor loom, then I had that knowledge and I was really ready to go ahead with the floor loom. But note that I did not buy that floor loom until my back was in a real recovery period for a good length of time, so that I felt really confident that yes, I can physically weave on this loom. I know it can be really hard if you have physical restrictions, if you have pain, but as I said before, I think that weaving is something that everyone can do. It's a matter of finding the right way for you. And also it can be accepting, like when I bought the table loom instead of the floor loom that I really wanted, accepting that, okay, at this time, buying a floor loom is not a good idea for me. I have these physical issues, they're not going away, they've been with me for some time, I'm working on it, I'm getting treatment, all of that, I'm trying to make things better, but at the moment, I just can't weave on a floor loom. So to have that kind of acceptance, you can have hope for the future, that you'll be able to ultimately do what you want to do. I mean, look at me, I'm doing it now. All those years ago, I never thought that I would be able to weave on a floor loom because my back was in such a bad way. So you don't have to give up on your dreams, but you may have to find other ways. So if weaving on a table loom is going to be too difficult for you physically, or if you think that it might be, say with what I mentioned with the shoulders, the neck, whatever it is that is your problem, maybe you could look at weaving on a rigid Heddle loom instead. You still get to weave, you still get to practice and get better, and then eventually, if your physical problems improve, then you could be in a position to step up. When you buy a table loom, it does come with a certain number of TechSolve Heddles, and these are great to get you started, but if you're going to be either weaving on more shafts or you want to weave wider items, you are definitely going to want more Heddles. I can't tell you an exact number, but if you have a look at your weaving drafts that you're really interested in, it's quite easy to figure out how many Heddles you're going to need for any given project by looking at the width and the threading repeats for how many times you're going to use each shaft for each threading repeat, and then multiplying that by the width, or by the number of times that you're going to repeat that threading. That gives you an idea of the Heddles that you need, and you can compare that with the Heddles that you already have. But extra Heddles are always great, they never go astray, and especially if you want to get into double width weaving, which you may well want to do on your table loom as well, that you're going to need double the number of Heddles that you would normally use. There are 2 more things that I want to mention before I finish up today. The first one is, when you're making your decision on your table loom, try to really think long term. It can be a bit tricky to do if you're just starting out and you're not really sure, you can't know exactly where you're going to end up as a weaver, but try to envision where you could end up. This comes back into choosing your shafts, choosing the size of your loom, choosing your setup, all these things that are going to allow you long term to weave the things that you really want to weave. So have a really careful think about the kinds of things that you want to weave going forward, and not just right now, but in 6 months' time, in a year's time, in 2 years' time. Let your imagination run wild and consider all the things that you could make. Now, I have met some weavers who, whether they've been weaving for some time or are newer, that they just like to stick to weaving the same things. And that's absolutely fine. But I can also guarantee that that doesn't happen for most people. For most people, once you fall down the rabbit hole of weaving, you want to weave all the things. And so you want to choose a loom that's going to be flexible and allow you to really explore all your options. Okay, the last thing I want to mention is use your time wisely before your loom arrives. Especially if you have found yourself in the situation of being on a list, waiting for your loom to arrive and it's taking longer than you thought. Use the time to fuel yourself and your knowledge and your imagination for all the things that you're going to do once the loom does arrive. Don't just think, oh, it's going to arrive some unknown day, unknown time. Be ready for it. That way, once you actually have the loom and you have it set up, you can really leap in there and bring your ideas to life and have at least a bit of background knowledge about how you're going to do that. I recommend that you go through YouTube, find everything that you can on table looms and weaving on table looms. Have a look at my online course that I already mentioned. Get yourself some good weaving books. I highly recommend that you get Anne Dixon's Hand Weaver's Pattern Directory. This is definitely my most used book on my weaving shelf, and trust me, I have a lot of books on my weaving shelves these days. It has hundreds of 4-shaft weaving patterns and it has a lot of information as well. Now, I haven't found any table loom weaving books specifically, and really that's just because any floor loom weaving draft you can use on a table loom as well, as long as you have the right number of shafts. They cross over very easily. If you do know of any specific table loom weaving books that you think are great, can you please share it down below so that other people can have a look at that too. You can also join online groups and ask questions about your loom and just read and educate yourself, see what other people are doing, and that's going to inspire you even more for when you get your own loom. Okay friends, that's about all the advice I have for you today. I think I've covered the most important points. I do have a bunch of links for you down below. If you don't see the links, click on more or show more. You might have to scroll down a little bit. The way YouTube's putting the listings now is a little bit funny, but you'll be able to see these links down below and just go through them and pick out the ones that are relevant to you. I think it's really great to see so many people taking up the table loom. When I got my first table loom, I don't know how many years ago now, maybe 8 years, something like that. It was really hard to find any information on using it. It's quite different now. A lot of people have table looms, and it gives people the opportunity to do multi-shaft weaving when they maybe don't have room for a floor loom, they don't want a floor loom, they don't want the cost of a floor loom. So table looms are really great, and I'm sure that if you are interested in getting one and you've already done some research, I think you'll really love the possibilities of having one. Friends, that's all from me for now. Until next time, happy weaving.